Hello and welcome to Setting the Stage, Episode 72, CalicoVisions and Psychomortis. This is a bit of a special episode because the conversation with Calico, initially we had a great episode. It's a long one, you can see it's 2.5 hours. And then, a few weeks after we'd recorded it, before I released this, Calico contacted me and said he wanted to, he reviewed a bunch of things that we talked about in his own writing of his game system Psychomortis and the setting that goes with it. And he'd changed so many things that he wanted to talk to me again to sort of clear up things that had changed from the original version. This episode is that original recording that we did. So it still has the stuff that Calico has since changed. And I'd thought about trying to sort of mesh those two recordings together to make a sort of accurate recording where everything was correct and what Calico's current vision of the game is as of the end of 2025. But that did not work. It just didn't flow correctly. So what we're doing is we're releasing this episode with the inaccuracies for what Calico has changed. And then in 2 weeks, we're going to release the sequel, which will be episode 72.5, which is the next conversation that I had with Calico where we continued everything and finished up. So look forward to that soon. And let's get into the show.
I'm here today with CalicoVisions, who's been working on a game called Psychomortis with its own little inbuilt setting for it. That's, it's hard to put into words what the setting in the game are. Hi Calico, how you doing?
Hello. I'm doing all right. Today's been long, but that's life as a working man, I suppose.
Yeah, for sure. Well, yeah. What do you do outside of RPGs?
I do landscaping and elderly care, typically. It's mostly landscaping. I live in a neighborhood with a lot of old folks, and so they'll call me and hire me to go out and do their garden and stuff. Maybe I'll fix a handrail or something like that occasionally. And outside of RPGs, my hobbies are not the most extensive, as the RPG business is kind of the culmination of all of it. I'm an amateur writer sometimes, and I've been doing bad art, for the past, 25 years of my life.
Yeah, cool. What got you starting playing RPGs?
Desperation. I was bored and lonely, and I thought, I've been wanting to get into tabletop games for a very, very long time. I'm not really new to the scene. I've been attempting to play them on and off with people for years, most of my life, but never really got anything consistent until the past few years or so, not even, really. Mostly because in the past I would always try to play D&D, and you know how that usually goes. So eventually I kind of gave up and decided, fuck it, I'll do my own thing. And, it was a really good stepping stone into building a big social circle of people to play with and hang out with and that kind of stuff.
What did you feel like was wrong with D&D for that?
The people that play D&D usually suck. And I thought if I make something that isn't like that, I won't get D&D players, and people won't go into it thinking like it's D&D. And that, that's kind of worked a little bit. Some of my early players really struggled to, I guess, get the idea that it's not like D&D. They were trying to play it like it was, and that's normal, but it also certainly doesn't help that there isn't a very big, tabletop board game, nerd sphere in my city. So pickings are slim.
Yeah, that does always create a problem, for sure. And I kind of get what you're saying about, people that only play D&D. Tends to be a particular way that they play it that makes it difficult to tell other types of stories, even if you're still using D&D when you probably shouldn't be.
It's pretty common. With the kinds of players that I was, I guess, having, it was very much like they were real big into I'm playing a tabletop game, so I can role play. And it was like they were really trying to get into the identity of somebody who was playing these kinds of games, and they weren't actually just straight up doing it. Mm-hmm. So that doesn't really jive well with the game or the setting, really. It requires I would describe full engagement to get the benefits out of.
Yeah, it does definitely feel like it's your game almost feels like a therapy exercise in some ways.
Actually, funnily enough, of course, my family and everybody knows about it, and I was telling my mom about it, and I was trying to describe it in nice old lady terms, and she was like, "Oh, you're teaching people to do shadow work," and it's like, yeah, kinda. The game very much is, from my experience, a learning tool almost in learning about yourself. I know that the players in particular have all gained some kind of intrapersonal wisdom or knowledge from the experience. And most certainly running it has taught me God knows how many things about myself and about so many different art forms and things like that, that just playing the game has made me a different person. And I would like to say that the same has gone for a lot of players. Early on, I ended up losing a lot of people because what would happen was that they would be very, normal, chill, cool people to hang out with outside of the game, but the game would kind of I would describe it as revealing certain toxic parts of their personality that would cause friction between them and other players, and eventually one party would leave. And of course, a lot of that has to do with outside of the game arguments that they would have. The table itself was very argumentative early on. I didn't want to have any part in it, but as the game runner, I kind of had to step in sometimes and try to engage in some level of conflict resolution. And it's hard to describe because I would like for the game and the setting to be a positive influence on people when they engage with it. But as it exists, an entity separate from myself, it feels like it is much more comfortable and much better at pulling out and revealing the negative parts of somebody's tendencies and putting them out on display and demanding that you either fix them or stop playing. And I've been put in that situation a lot with my methods of DMing, and it's hard, but I've managed to make it. But we are talking all this about the game and the setting, but I feel like we haven't really established a foundation of what exactly any of this is.
I was exactly thinking that. Yeah. Let's talk about the game before the setting. I think that might. I mean, they sort of blend together in a lot of ways.
They do. The setting was made technically before the game, but the game is made for it's a whole thing. Don't worry about it. The game itself, Psychomortis, is meant to be an intense tactical dungeon crawler. At its core, it is a game that is meant to be about dungeon crawling and about injecting as much role play and narrative depth in the emergent storytelling that comes from that kind of format. And so I guess the crux of the experience is that every character is kind of a dark Soulsian, lost soul that has found themselves in a part of the setting, Pandora's Labyrinth, a vast and infinite underground space of all kinds of spooky horror nightmare stuff. And the whole idea is that it's meant to reflect the inner world of the characters. The characters exist in a space in which their thoughts and their ideas and the player's thoughts and ideas and their emotions are reflected in the world around them. And that reflection compels growth and evolution from that. And that is the main driving force of the game. All of the fancy tactical stuff and the planning approaches and combat is all to serve that goal.
Yeah, when I read about it, like the vast labyrinth beneath the earth that reflects your inner self, it seemed very much like the plot for the horror movie As Above, So Below. Have you seen that one before?
I haven't, but I've heard a whole hell of a lot of comparisons to games from Darkest Dungeon to Dark Souls to Silent Hill to Fear and Hunger to God knows what else. Just about anything people have compared this stuff to.
There are a lot of horror things that are about let's go into the dungeon and find stuff. Like Diablo was like that, the original one. So just like go into a dungeon, I get that comparison. It was more about that, like the characters in that have to overcome like a traumatic memory as part of escaping.
Yeah.
It's not quite the same thing, but still, like the psychological discovery is
yeah.
More
I mean, that's really common. with horror media in general. That is largely the whole crux of a lot of it, is that the deepest horror is what's in your mind and all that. But I wouldn't really say that that element of the setting is meant to be the source of the horror. Especially when playing the game, the source of the horror is largely mechanical. It's spooky monsters and traps and high lethality and all that, and the unknowns. But the very nature of this concept of, I guess, enlightenment is probably best represented. I guess enlightenment versus evil is best represented in the game's Ilias and guilt system, in that as a character engages with the world fully and vulnerably, when they engage in selfless acts or good acts or, self-care and things like that, when they address the many struggles that they have, which in character creation, a player would decide things like their character's most traumatic memory. There's an object that your character carries called an object of obsession, and that object is kind of the core of that person's being. It is something that they've latched onto as a comfort tool. And when the character, through the hand of the player, rejects that comfort and rejects the placid nature of their life and confronts themselves and desires for better, they gain Ilias, which is a game resource that, kind of like, if you're familiar with Demon Souls' world tendency, when the world tendency is quote-unquote higher, the world gets easier in Dark Souls. But in this case, as a character's Ilias rises, they become more separated from the physical world. So you can think of it like a scale of spirituality, almost. And as that value rises, more dangerous and crazy scenarios and game biomes and monsters are become available to them. And the difficulty raises, The game gets harder specifically because the players exist in this dichotomy of, like, we want to simulate evil. We want to simulate struggle and pain and agony and that kind of stuff and all the suffering that comes with that. And so when you simulate that kind of thing, what you want as a player is for it to get more intense as you get more powerful. But simultaneously, as you get more powerful, the challenges themselves become more crucial to your character. And that's, I think, best represented in the guilt system, in that if your character indulges in their darker desires, if they retreat into comfort, if they act with ego and with malice, and they lash out and they act sinfully towards others in a more general sense, not necessarily a religious sense, their guilt rises, and that puts a limit on their Ilias. The more weight that they carry with them, the more struggles that they bring on themselves, the harder their life gets, because the further away, quote-unquote, escape reaches, which would theoretically take place at the end of the Ilias cycle.
Okay, so like if you max out your Ilias, it's sort of like, oh, you've finished your self-discovery and the Labyrinth lets you out kind of thing?
Kind of. That's sort of the idea, especially in the games that some people are running. But there are different ways to play with it. Ilias at its core is a kind of advancement system similar to XP, where you do X thing, you get Y reward, carrot and stick sort of deal. But it is important to distinguish that from experience, as that does exist as a not really a resource, but a value in the game. And experience would be your character's quote-unquote physical or literal capability to accomplish something, whereas Ilias is representative of a more quantum state of connection to the other side, separation from the veil of materiality that exists around you. You can touch a desk and feel it, but just underneath that is the universe. And somebody with quote-unquote high Ilias can touch that universe, not just the desk.
I was curious about this is me trying to understand it fully, but like the derivation of Ilias, because guilt, it's an English word, I get it. Is Ilias deriving from like illumination? Is that the intention?
It is a word that came to me. It has no real etymological origin, but it just feels right.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough. When I was going through your survey and trying to understand it, it felt like enlightenment might have been a way of phrasing it, like, the Buddhist, Hindu.
In a way, but a character with high alias isn't necessarily enlightened. They're more, I suppose you could say, attuned to it. They can see it better, and their path becomes clearer, but whether they pursue it is their own choice. A big part of my, I guess, game design philosophy, separate from the setting philosophy, is chiefly this game has like a bias. It has a philosophy and ideal. It exists within a particular realm of thought, so to speak. But it still needs to be possible for a player to go against that if they so desire. And right now the system doesn't really support it, but in the future I do intend to support things like demon worship or demon following, and it will come with hefty consequences and hefty rewards because the bait that exists in one's mind is very potent and very strong.
So it's attempting, I guess, to provide a tracker for the character's like personal internal journey, and then also provides sort of a adjacent leveling system where as it goes up, like the challenges that they face change along the way.
Yeah. Mechanically, it's very much just a sort of secondary world difficulty scale. As more monster types and faction types and areas and that kind of thing get quote-unquote unlocked by a character's alias, they should generally also be leveling up, because by playing the game, you'd be gaining the standard experience points and also the alias, but you can be getting standard experience while also gaining guilt, and so there's this theoretical character that is level-wise very powerful and very capable. He has high stats, he's got all the best gear or whatever, but he is fundamentally weak and infantile and incapable because of his supposed connection to whatever, the physicality of it all, some kind of emotional tie, some kind of something that weighs him down, a literal guilt or a sin that pulls him down, something like that. So
I'm imagining a character like an alcoholic that you said there was like an object is like a hip flask that he's carrying around.
Exactly. In fact, a hip flask is a common one that I've seen around. Other examples have been like wedding rings from lost wives or husbands. In fact, of my myriad of players, the most common backstory is burned down house and dead wife. And the most common, so there's a thing in a game called a trigger, which is something that, triggers a stress response from a character. So usually it's tied to their backstory, like it'll be an idea or kind of, somebody who might be touchy with love, who like lost a young love when they were a teenager and has been a lonely loser their whole life, might be touchy around physical affection, and so when they experience that, they receive various negative penalties, and the most common trigger is fire.
All right. I guess an easy one to pick. Like, it is dangerous.
Yeah, it's dangerous and easy, and it's easy for a game master to manipulate because you need torches in the dark and stuff, and you can set things on fire, and it's very useful. It's a really common one. It is a rule in the game that a trigger must be manipulatable. It must be abusable. And generally the DM will kind of decide it with the player, because it has to be, as a player, if you're trying to metagame or something, you might be inclined to make your trigger 3-inch long number 2 pencils. And nowhere in the game, unless you're explicitly being targeted, are you ever going to find a 3-inch long number 2 pencil. It's,
Yeah.
According to the players, it is very much a game that cares a lot more about that kind of stuff than your experience levels.
Yeah. I would almost feel like that's... Do you really need a rule telling people they shouldn't be doing something like that?
Listen, man, it's a kind of a difficult combination of high challenge tactical stuff where you want to kind of play meta and play smart and win, and also theater kid character writing, my traumas type shit,
Yeah, no, I was joking with saying that you don't, yes, you do need a rule for that, for sure. People are always going to abuse things if they feel like they can.
Well, any smart GM wouldn't let that happen without a rule, so.
Yeah. But telling the GM how to play the game and telling the players what to expect, it's always...
Exactly. Yeah.
Can you walk me through like character creation for the game?
Okay, that's a fun one. Uh, if you're around design spaces a lot, you'll likely have heard about the Sigil, which is a character creation tool. It's a pretty lengthy process, but you can describe it pretty quickly. There's kind of two phases. There's the writing phase and the numbers phase. The numbers phase is the first one. You would start off by choosing a character's archetype, of which there are the 12 Jungian archetypes that kind of found the basis of their role to play socially and emotionally in a scenario, in a space like that.
Okay.
And there are 12 of those, and there are 6 planets. Of those 6 planets, each planet has 2 archetypes associated with it, and this is the start of the sigil. There are multiple rings around the sigil, and you would pick your archetype and also subsequently your planet by consequence. Choose your character's duty or their class, and this would be their kind of general mechanical role. The options are pretty limited because it's not the most important thing, but there's like, if you want to play a melee guy, there's the courser. There's a pretty robust combo and melee combat system with quarters and all kinds of guts and gore and horror stuff. There's the surveyors, which are kind of intel information gathering guys, and consecutors, or the ecclesiastic templars, of which they're an anchor type. They specialize in keeping a team organized and coherent and maintaining a sturdy role within the space and not needing as much aid as everybody else. Afterwards, you would roll for your character stats and fill out the rest of your sigil. Now, the sigil is, I won't get into the weeds of it, but it's a process of selecting various effects that a character can have, mostly stat-based, but they do hold some bearing on future things, because when your character reaches maximum Ilias, they would unlock the final ring on their sigil, and that ring gives them a special, unique buff that's super powerful and shit. And then after that, after you calculate things like your health values and your various fighting and ranged scores and that, then you would kind of decide. Ideally, a player would have a character idea before this, but generally after you do the numbers stuff, you decide on what kind of person your character is. And afterwards, you would choose your object of obsession, the origin of that obsession, something called a repressed truth, which exists as kind of a sliding scale thing about your character that they have to learn as their Ilias develops. Decide your triggers and your reliefs, then fill in things like your existing Ilias values, potential guilt, equipment, your vices, and general personality quirks. Most of those things are load-bearing and are mechanically important, and they're also the hardest part of character creation, because people tend to come in with a very basic character idea, and then the framework compels them to ask, who is this person? What are they really underneath all of it?
Mm-hmm.
Why are they quiet and isolated and not speaking a whole lot? Why are they very aggressive and kind of, bombastic and pompous? Because there has to be a reason for that kind of behavior, because that behavior becomes the foundation for their Ilias development and what exactly it is that they're fighting against to become a better person.
Yeah, that's difficult, because I feel like a lot of people usually start with an idea for what they, their personality is like, and then maybe come up with a justification later within play.
Yeah.
So having to do it initially it changes the dynamic. Yeah.
I've heard some thoughts and like comments on front loading all of that, and I've considered various things about it, but I think it's really necessary for it to be super front loaded. Of character creation, I think my personal favorite step that isn't the sigil is filling in your traumata slots. Now, this game has a guaranteed revival system. Each character has minimum, I think, 6 lives. And I guess maximum 6 lives, minimum 3 or 4, because you roll on a chart for it. And though when you die, you come back and you receive a debuff, like a physical ailment, either like your brain goes in backwards, or your hands are backwards, or like, you lose all of your toes, or, your spine is outside of your back. And
right on.
When those things come along and kind of ruin your whole builds, they also replace the things that you fill in your traumata slots with. That is called a traumata, and a traumata slot is taken up by those, and a traumata slot when you start the game is filled in with personality traits, memories, important things to your character, stuff that really matters to them, to their being, to their nature. And as they die continuously, they lose those memories and become less and less them. And I've heard a lot of positive opinions on that framework as well.
Yeah, that sounds horrifying.
Oh, it's I mean, I could go into pneumatism. That's a lot of people's fun ones. I remember actually when I released the update with pneumatism in it, one of the players had like a 20-minute long crash out about it because it was so crazy and so what the fuck.
I do want to get to pneumatism, but I did want to go through character creation a bit more to make sure I understand it correctly. So you're starting with one of the Jungian archetypes, which is like a personality thing. I forget what that was from when I took psychology ages ago, but can you give me a basic rundown of what that is?
So the game has 2 stat arrays. You've got your major stats and your minor stats. There's trickle down. Don't worry about the numbers business. An archetype determines your first stat array, the major stats, and generally how your character build is going to go. But I would say the most important part of the archetype is that each one is meant to serve as kind of food for thought for a character. If you're going in completely blind and you don't know who you want to make, what you want to play, and you look at the archetypes, and assuming that you understand the stat arrays, you can go through and you can pick what kind of dude do I want to play as, what kind of person do I want to be, and the idea is that each of the archetypes represents a kind of, well, it's an archetype. It's an archetypal role that exists within humanity. And you can kind of pick and choose if you want to follow it, if you don't want to, but it's meant to give a nice amount of thought for exactly what you want your game to look like, what you want your, sessions to look like when you play. And I would like to say there's some good variety. When I do the write-up for each one, I try to write it in such a way that it's not like a hard set thing, but I try to write in very vague terms, like generally, sometimes, oftentimes, that kind of language to keep the door open for deviations. But a lot of the time when people write their characters, they follow along with the general idea of their character's archetype. Maybe that's just because my players aren't great writers, or maybe it's because it's just written out that way, or maybe it's because the stat arrays are good. I don't know. But generally, like if somebody were to pick the innocent, generally that character would be somebody who is somewhat more innocent than others. They would be more optimistic and hopeful and kind of idealistic and more, looking towards the sky and the sun. And that's following this game's philosophy. That's a good thing. That's a really good thing, actually. But the reasoning I couldn't tell you. Maybe it's because people are just susceptible to suggestion, and that's what the archetypes are.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's just you've told them what it should be, so they're following along with that.
Yeah, and that's why I say I try to keep it open, but it's hard to include archetypes like that without making it feel like you're being boxed in.
And you need to give stuff names that feels somewhat descriptive, so people will pick up on that no matter what you're doing.
Yeah. And hey, for the people that recognize them, it's kind of a cool moment.
Okay. And then the planets was something you said next, and that's like an astrological concept for like the 6 inner planets.
Yeah. So the core idea of that is it's really not like a very big part of character creation or of a character, but each planet has a general personality assigned to it. It's not explained in the book, but it's implicit. Mars and Venus in particular, but also Jupiter and Mercury all have identities associated with them, kind of personalities and vibes, colors and concepts. And each archetype lines up pretty well with those concepts. Saturn, for example, exists a lot as a concept of inversion and of like malice. It is the opposite of Uranus, which would be good and selflessness. Saturn is generically seen as the evil planet. It's not necessarily, but it is low vibrational, so to speak. So the archetypes that align with Saturn, the outlaw and the jester, are both theoretically low vibrational, deceptive, low feeling archetypes. Jesters are often deceptive and acting out in ways that they aren't truly are. They aren't reflecting their true selves out of inner fear. And outlaws often feel persecuted and beaten down by the world, and they act out for the very reason that they feel like they've been persecuted. And those are very common tropes of those archetypes, so it makes sense that those kinds of people would be under Saturn. And I forget the name of the planet that's left out, of which there are 7, but there's only 6 here in the game, and that's for number purposes, obviously. There aren't enough planets to divide everything equally.
You left out Neptune, I think.
Neptune, I believe it was, yeah.
Yeah. Including Uranus there, I thought you would go for Neptune over Uranus, because Uranus was discovered later, so I think it's not one of the usual astrological ones.
It's not, honestly. One of the reasons why the planets are the way that they are is because when I was writing this system, I was looking through a lot of my astrological notes and all of my, that stuff. And I kind of forgot about Uranus, and I didn't end up including it basically on accident. And when I realized I didn't, I was kind of already like, oh, well, I mean, I don't want to change it, and there's 7, it's not, 7 doesn't really align with 12 very well.
Yeah.
And so I would either have to stick it with half or go all the way up to 12 planets, and that's a whole nother ball game that I don't want to get into. Generally, astrology isn't really my thing, and astrology isn't really much of a thing for this game or its setting.
Okay.
Kind of. You'll see how I'm basically lying to you possibly later, but astrology isn't the most thing.
Yeah, I could see where that's going from what I've read, but yeah, we'll get to that. And from there, you choose like like a sort of class archetype, like fighter or wizard, kind of like what your more like skill set is.
I'm actually really insecure about the existence of the class system because I just generally hang around a lot of very anti-class spaces, I guess. But I think it's really necessary for a game like this because if you didn't have the classes, it would be a lot harder to get an idea of what you're supposed to be doing during things like combat or when you're in like a scenario of like, oh, there's some monsters in this room. What do we do about that? Say, for example, you're the Outrider, right? And you know that on the other side of this chasm, there's a lot of monsters, but you can't see them, And the Outrider player, even though anybody can have a low ranged accuracy, and by low, that means good. Don't worry about it. Okay. But the Outrider player, the one who's thinking the most about their ranged accuracy, is going to immediately think, oh, I can throw a torch over there. I can shoot a light bulb in that wall. I can, it gets people in this mindset of playing as a team and filling in particular roles mechanically, but not narratively. Narratively, each character kind of fulfills a more unique role than their class. But I've also seen examples where people pick a class like the Bravier and just think, oh, I'm big and tough and stoic and quiet and epic. Because the Bravier is like a knight class. They're one of the anchors. And that association is kind of hard to break, but I think it's part and parcel when you give people so much onus to write their character. They kind of will inevitably lean on various mechanics to fill in the gaps that they can write in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think having classes can make sense as well, because like with character creation being so complex with different moving parts that all feel relevant, like having a little package where you don't have to think too much about it is fine. Like there still seems like there's plenty of customization here for characters where compared to like D&D 5th edition where you kind of pick your class and your archetype and then you're done.
A big thing for me is that this is a very sandbox heavy game. Your items and your equipment are very, very important, and they matter more than your class. So really, the most important things about your classes is what they can do with the tools that you have. And each class relies on a particular kind of, I guess, subset of tools, with the sole exception of a class like the Courser. And the Coursers, they're the main ninja guy. They're very fast. They deal shitloads of damage. They're very aggressive and very accomplished in melee combat. And in melee combat, all you really need is your weapon. You can have multiple, but at the end of the day, all you got to do is roll above half the value, and you're getting instant kills. And that's really all that matters. And so there's this kind of dynamic where a class like a Surveyor or like an Exmodoc both require way more tools to fulfill their job properly. They need access to like spells, technology, things like PPKs or programming kits or various other things to fulfill their duties, but the more basic, quote-unquote, a class is, the less that you need. And the fewer resources you need as a character, the more you can save for your team. So alone, the way that a class interacts with the sandbox is enough of a reason, I think, to have classes.
Okay, yeah, I can see that. So after that, you go to picking more like the personality-based stuff that we talked about before, like the dependent stats and the I forget what you called the item thing that they pick.
Oh, the object of obsession?
Thank you. Yes, object of obsession. So it's sort of like filling out the rest of your character sheet. From there.
The colloquial term for that has become the OO, of course.
The OO?
The OO. Yeah, it's 3 O's when you abbreviate it.
Object of... oh, okay. Object of obsession. All right. Huh? Ooh, it's what you say when you look at it?
Some people do, yeah. Some people are really into that thing. Okay. Generally, character creation takes... Okay, so let me I guess give you an example. I recently took on some new players. There were 3 of them. During the character creation session, which I was there for, there were 4 people. One of them was kind of already done with a lot of it because he was a returning player whose character had perma-died and he needed to make a new one. So this was a group of 4 players, and creating and basically, not all the way, but basically finishing character creation for all 4 of them took 5 hours. I consider that a massive success. Because the first time I tried to play this game and run it, character creation for 2 people took multiple days. And that was before half of the things that we're talking about. That was before the sigil, before the triggers, before the compulsions or the Ilias and the guilt. This was just the basic stat stuff. Took them multiple days.
Jeez.
So I think it's an accomplishment that for a single person making a character takes around 45 minutes. Because compared to how it used to be, it's way better. And I attribute that mostly to generally the understanding of the game is a lot higher now. Usually somebody doesn't play the game unless they kind of already know what they're getting into. I have a very extensive warning section at the beginning of the book that details exactly how intense this game gets and exactly why if you open the book and you're playing it and you get surprised by any of the horror or the mature content, that's 100% on you. The opening of the book literally says, if you cannot handle the intensity of this, turn back now. This game is not for you. And
just the name too, like Psychomortis, you know?
It's very intense. Aesthetically, I want to kind of dress up the game and the setting in this kind of anime-style 2000s D&B and breakcore. I've come to really enjoy digital hardcore and other early jungle genres and the like. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to plaster that game with that kind of aggression and mythos, because playing the game, it really feels like it sometimes. I feel like I'm under attack sometimes, and I'm the game master. God knows what the players are experiencing. It's a tough game. It really demands a lot of you. And I don't know if I'm allowed to say what ending a session feels like, but it feels really good. It feels really good, and then there's no post-nut clarity either, so it's perfect.
Oh, great.
Yeah. Well, there is sometimes post-session clarity, but that's part of the whole appeal, I suppose.
All right, cool. So getting into actually the sort of mechanical side of playing the game, you mentioned that it was that low numbers was better. So is this like a roll under your stat kind of thing? Or over your stat, sorry.
It's kind of complicated. It's 2d12 sum plus mod. So when you're rolling a stat check, like if you're rolling for a power to bust open a door, then that would be you're trying to roll above a static DC with the modifier associated with your value. But there is this kind of, I guess, branch-like form that the values of the stats and the modifiers of the stats apply to different things universally. So ranged accuracy, for example, is determined by the value of your flexibility stat. It's a derived statistic that goes lower dependent on various things. And when you're trying to fire a bow or throw a dagger or shoot a gun, your goal is to roll above your ranged accuracy value in the basic sense. Ammo types apply penalties to that. So if you have 12 RA and you're firing like a bow with an arrow type that has +3, you have to roll above a 15. And the same goes for spells. Spell accuracy is 2d12 sum plus, it's a dice pool thing, because you have a catalyst, and that catalyst gives you a bonus dice, and you have to roll above your spell accuracy, and spells will also have spell accuracy penalties, and so will armor, and it's a whole thing. So depending on your play style, I suppose, you will have to be approaching different derived statistics, but you can invest more freely, I suppose, in your standard stat array. For melee characters, they have their fighting score, and fighting score doesn't determine chance to hit. The game is auto-hit, actually. But fighting score exists as a sliding scale that unlocks different tiers of combos. And combos are different kinds of attacks you can string together. Think of it like you're labbing a combo in a fighting game. It's like that.
Okay.
And so each of these, I guess you could say the three dichotomies have their own derived statistic based on different minor stats that are kind of trickled down from the array. And the minor stats have values that are rolled, but also determined by the trickle down of the major stats, and the major stat values are exponentially more powerful as they influence the minor stats to be better, but the minor stats are relatively linear.
I mean, this seems pretty complicated. Is it worth the squeeze for you for making something like this? Because it feels like there's pieces here that, I mean, I have a very incomplete picture of it because I've gotten whatever you've said over the last 5 minutes, but do you feel like this is something that could be simplified but still keeping your intentions for the system?
I've considered that. I've recently been having some ideas. I'm currently going through a redraft, so I'm going to be rewriting the whole book, and I'm starting to work on that, and a lot of things are bound to change. The general idea won't, but mechanics might. And that is one of the things I'm thinking about. I plan to maintain and keep the trickle-down double stat array, because that leads to a lot of mechanical nuance in exactly what players can roll for certain situations, what they can want in a scenario, what they can accomplish in a scenario. It's given more mechanical nuance, in that it's obvious you're rolling power for this for explosive strength, not stamina for carrying a big chest 3 miles. And I do intend to keep that. The ranged accuracy and the spell accuracy things, and I mean, there's a whole machine working under all of that to make it function. But I do agree, it's very complicated. But from feedback that I've heard, the complications, not really the complications, but the complexity of the experience is one of the drawing points, particularly for one of my main game players. He very much loves the what he calls the build autism, and there is a lot of build autism. There is a lot of consideration of where you put your numbers and how you manage your equipment, what you equip when, why, how, all that, and that's a big mechanical motivation. I think it's very fun. Generally, the numbers part of character creation is the easiest, fastest, and most fun part. Writing is hard, believe it or not.
Well, I guess another part of this is like complexity and like filling out your character sheet can usually be fine as long as what you're actually doing during the game is pretty easy. Like if I have to do some addition plus division thing to find out what a stat is, but then that stat is pretty much set for that, for a session. Maybe I level up and it changes, but that's fine. Like that's not too complicated.
Generally, those numbers only change when you level up. There aren't a lot of I've considered including a lot of things like stat and attribute damage. It's a very dynamic way to engage with the game, but also you're in the middle of a fight and you get hit with a blast ball that reduces your power and your exotica by 5 points, and it's like fuck me. I guess we're going to be here for the next 15 minutes while I redo all of this nonsense, figure out what I can't do now. It's a lot easier to. My usual strategy with things like that is just to either, like all or nothing. I will either wipe out a stat's ability to function completely or not touch it at all. Like, one of the most prolific status effects in the game is weakness, which, if I go to the front page, it subtracts -4 to the result of all rolls and subtracts 2 from all damage output and stacks infinitely. So there is a kind of cap point where eventually you just cannot roll above a 0. I haven't done that to my players yet, but there's a DM that I know who's looking to run this game who's probably going to do that. And it's like, the game is made to be hostile and evil and stuff, but
yeah,
some people enjoy it a little bit too much. In fact, that was a big hurdle for me as a designer and a game master, was that I really struggled to accept the difficulty and the challenge that my players wanted. I always feel very guilty anytime I make them struggle or suffer in any context, and this is something that accepting that that's what people want is something I've had to learn. It's been very difficult.
Yeah. It's different for different groups, but yeah, people want challenges in games.
Yeah, I mean, if you're playing this game, it's pretty clear what you want.
Yeah, it does seem that way. The only other question I had about the mechanics at the moment was about the resurrection system that you'd mentioned. Like, when you die, one of your traumata slots gets overwritten. I mean, how often is death in the game? Like, a lot of games try to have death not happen very frequently because, it's the end of a character's journey. So like D&D tries to avoid it pretty much entirely because they have resurrection. So like death doesn't even matter. Other games, it's like for Blades in the Dark, it's this slow process of getting more and more trauma until you're dead. So that seems more like yours. It's not quite the same way that the trauma's working. But even in Blades in the Dark, it still feels like it's pretty hard to get one of those slots, has been my experience.
If I had to describe the lethality of the game, it would be infrequent but instant. Particularly, I recently ran a fight not too long ago, a couple sessions ago, that was a bit overkill, honestly. The players did survive, barely, but monsters tend to do pretty high damage. Your health values can get pretty high. Like, I think the highest health that a level 1 character can have, they're playing a Bravier and a min-max, everything is like in the mid-30s. And for context, at level 1, an average monster does about 1d4 to 1d6 damage per hit, not including AC, which is direct damage reduction. So players can get pretty chunky and pretty tanky if they invest in it. But dying through health is actually not that big of a concern. Once you hit around, I would say 15 to 20 health, you won't need to worry about that for the rest of a game, because monster damage values never really go above things like 2d8 unless it's some kind of special move where it's like, oh, this is a nuclear bomb going off in your face and I'm going to roll 4d20 for this. Hope they roll low. But the most common killer is fear. Dread. Dread is a health-like resource that you accumulate when your character engages with things that like the triggers, or just generally stressful events. A teammate goes to -1 HP, which you can survive to. The limit is usually -2.
Okay.
That usually stresses you out. If you fail a check and like somebody separates from the group and now you're in a bad situation, that usually raises it. And the higher your dread goes, eventually you'll reach a status effect called terror. And terror is a real horrible thing, because it will melt you to death. It will evacuate the blood from your body through your pores and turn you into a tree. It will ruin you. But you have, like, it's a whole complicated system, but generally an average character has 6 points of dread they can gain. At 10 they get a debuff, at 12 they roll terror, and when you're rolling against terror, you're rolling against your current dread value and other various stat systems. And so there is a such thing as an anti-dread build that maxes out how much dread you can take. And I would point to that as the tankiest build. Because dread damage is often unavoidable and doesn't require any monsters to be present. No traps, no nothing. It can happen if you fail a willpower check, if you just make a mistake and like fall off a bridge or something, if you lose somebody, if you're hallucinating, if you're suffering from a psychosomatic disease or some kind of effect that an enemy applied onto you, it can really get you there. There have been times where characters have gone through entire arcs within the 20 minutes it takes for their dread to go from 4 to 12. And the end of that arc is always, oh my god, I'm an idiot and now my life is over. That final kind of realization of what they should have done rather than what they did do. The dread system does play a pretty big role in the whole meta-narrative of the experience, in that it is the catalyst by which ultimate evil affects the characters, and Ilias is one of the only ways to fight against it.
Okay, so it sounds like there's a lot of sort of different health bars you're tracking. So you have your dread one and your sort of normal health one. And I think you mentioned another one there. Did I get that wrong?
No, there's only the two. Those are really the only two things that can kill you, at least. It is a dungeon crawler, so there's a lot of attrition and resource management as a lot of the gameplay. And I've heard it described that there are many ways for your poor character to be mangled and mutilated beyond recognition. And dread is the most effective way to do that. Because of the nature of the setting and how everything is woo-woo mental stuff, dread is very potent and very physical.
All right, so dread can actually deal sort of physical damage to you. It's not just a feeling.
Well, it doesn't deal physical damage to you, but it causes physical effects. It will inflict physical status effects or debuffs, or, like I said earlier, when terror kills you, when you die to dread, it physically kills you. In some surreal, magical way, like I said, blood will evacuate from your body through your pores, or rot and vines will crawl through your bones in your body, or your bones will melt and turn to acid and destroy you from the inside, or, whatever is accurate and fitting to the character and their hubris that caused them to reach that point. Drowning while in oxygen, starving to death after eating, and vice versa, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I'm somewhat surprised that this is not based off of As Above, So Below, the more you tell me about it.
I feel like I've heard somebody mention that movie at one point before, but I don't watch many movies. I take a lot of inspiration from them. Particularly Revolver and Angel's Egg are huge, huge stylistic and tonal inspirations for me. But I don't watch a lot of movies. And what few movies I do watch are usually old anime, so...
All right, yeah. No, I can see bits of Revolver and what you've described.
Yeah, that movie really... It influenced me a lot as a person and as an artist. I watched it, of course, when I was older and more cognizant, and not a dumb little kid. Because I think at one point I saw it on like my grandma's like movie spinner thing when I was like 7, and at one point I swear I saw Jason Statham and the black guy in like some scene, and when I saw the movie, when I was reminded of the movie as an adult, I thought like, what? I've seen this before. I didn't remember anything about it, but by golly, little kids should not be watching that one.
Oh boy, no. It was one that my dad kept from me for a very long time because he said like it's not for kids, and it was Blade Runner.
Ooh, Blade Runner is a good one. My dad was very much a fan of schlocky action stuff, so I never got to watch Blade Runner until I was older, but he wanted to watch Terminator 2 with me when I was 8, and I did not make it. He thought that was his favorite movie of all time, and it was like, man, I'm 8, I don't know nothing. This is scary, dude. What's happening?
Feel like just the plot of like that being about, you know, a machine trying to murder a child just feels like it's this different level of terror for watching as a kid.
Yeah, I remember the corpse on the spike trap in the first Indiana Jones movie scared the hell out of me when I was a little kid. I love those movies now, but man, that was horrible.
Yeah, my sister could watch like nothing like that. It wasn't until the Pirates of the Caribbean was what sort of broke her out of not wanting to see anything that was like remotely scary. I don't know what did it for her there, but that seemed to do it.
I don't know. I was going to make a joke about how that main character pirate guy does a lot of things for a lot of women, but I don't remember his name, and now the joke is gone and the opportunity is gone, and it's ruined. I've ruined everything.
All right. Yeah. Well, yeah. Back to Psychomortis.
There was a topic here at one point.
Yeah. I wanted to, so we were talking about death and like how that affects the different ways to get there, kind of. And earlier you mentioned pneumatism, which seemed related from how you described it in the survey. Do you want to go into that now?
Pneumatism. All right. I have to wonder if I want to talk about this narratively or mechanically. So a pneumata is a person, creature, or thing that has lost its soul, either had it taken and consumed or traded willingly. The process of pneumatism is of transformation into falseness, into deception and unreality. Physically, this manifests as a form of roboticization, where the body becomes metal and machine. It grows, plates along the arms, organs are replaced with metal boxes and pumping pipes and things like that. And this can happen to landscapes, people, trees, living things, any kind of life form, even the air if it's potent enough. And this force emanates from demons. And by demons, I mean capital D fallen angel demons. Real bad dudes. They don't manifest physically within the setting. We'll get to that if we ever. But their influence is very strongly felt. And that influence is the roboticization. They are responsible for, I don't know if I mentioned it to you in the survey or anything like that, but on the surface, there are these vast and tall machine towers that are composed of just pumping metal, flowing liquids, a living, breathing entity made of metal and concrete, this great brutalist dominating structure. And that is made by the demons. And pneumatism is a thing that can happen to a character in the game that forces them to suffer through that transformation. It comes with a series of bonuses, buffs, and the like. One of them is never gaining dread from negative social interactions. That's a really early one, and when one of my players saw that, he was like, you know what, yeah, you get bonus stats later on, and you get no dread and all this. Like, that's cool. I'm going to give my soul to the devil. And he's looking back now, and he's real fucking upset about that decision right now, because there's this concept, I guess, of the adversary. It's a very Christian idea, but it exists across all religions along the world. Yep. Of this manifestation of evil that will bait people and manipulate them into pursuing it rather than righteousness or goodness or whatever with false truths, with lies. And the way that pneumatism functions in the game is to be that false truth. It comes with all of these really not very useful benefits that look nice on paper and a laundry list of debuffs. And as this character transforms into a robot, they lose parts of their personality. Traumata slots are taken away and replaced with nothing, without death. They lose parts of their memory. They lose connection to their repressed memories. They lose connection to their triggers and their reliefs which are an opposite of a trigger. And all that's left behind as this person devolves and degrades into this disgusting metal animal that is nothing but impulse and instinct, all that's left behind is their worst traits, because they didn't fight hard enough to keep themselves human. The thing that made that one player that I spoke about a while ago freak out about the pneumatism is a function called a discharge cleanse, which is in place of a willpower check at any point where a character would contest dread gain or anything of the sort. They would roll instead 2d12 with no modifiers, and if they roll below an 8, they will kind of tense up, cripple down, fall on the ground, and begin expulsing what remains of their meat and flesh physical body. You see, despite giving away their soul, that force of life, that motion, still exists in them. A little bit of that divinity still exists because they exist. And I won't get into the details unless you want me to, but as long as this person still exists, their body will continue to try and exist. Their real body will exist trapped inside of the metal cage that makes up their false body. And that false body will occasionally do a discharge cleanse and push all of that nasty shit out. And it's really painful, and it sucks, and it cripples you for a while, and it, you know.
Is this the metal body trying to remove the original body parts?
Yeah, in a way. It is pushing out and chopping up and excreting all of the meat and bone and sinew and nerves of the original body that continually attempts to grow and continue to exist and fight for its existence in the body. In a way, it's all very allegorical, but that inner meat and flesh body is a representation of that true self, whereas the Pneumata's body is a representation of the perceived false self. It is a form of self-deception.
Okay.
Not mechanically supported right now, but discussed within the setting and discussed potentially to be mechanical, is that Pneumatas are unable to create. They're unable to, that sense of divine still exists inside of them, but it is so weak that they cannot create, they can only destroy. And they cannot form motion on their own. They have to power themselves by stealing the energy of other creatures. They are quite literally energy vampires that will kill and consume the energy of living creatures or of plants and trees, of the rocks and stone, the natural beauty of the earth. They will be forced to destroy it and consume it to maintain their false self while their true self suffers. And that, of course, spreads this pneumatism, creates more of these brutalist structures and more pneumatas, and it is, in a way, a kind of reproductive cycle, although not really. A person can get their soul back, and the ways that have been discussed about that is that chiefly, and the primary way, would be that somebody without a soul needs to kill, or you can't really kill, but to quote-unquote kill, defeat, and reclaim their soul from the entity that they gave it to or that stole it. So this would typically be a demon or maybe another pneumata, or in this player's case, life. When a character dies, they are forced to go through a kind of regeneration process, and during that process, their mind experiences the forces of life and death that discuss with them exactly why they should be allowed back. In fact, in the rules, it's written that the player is supposed to, in character, argue for why their character deserves to come back. And if they can't, then they aren't allowed to revive, and they have to make a new character. I haven't done that. Okay. I haven't been able to enforce that emotionally, but that is the intention, that there has to be a reason for life to let you back and for death to let you go. And during that process, you can choose to give up your soul and go back physically, forsake death and forsake life, exist in none of it, and give life your soul to be used in a better place. In that context, I can only imagine that somebody would need to go on a big quest to kill life, or at least retrieve it in some way.
Right.
Because you can't really, it's all conceptually you can't really kill that. So there must be some way to retrieve it.
It feels like in that case, it's almost like retrieving it would be an act of corruption in its own. Like, okay, we're going to take your soul and use it to save this stillborn baby or something. Then you have to go get it back from the now living child.
That, I mean, yeah, in a way that is corruption. I haven't exactly thought through the soul retrieving process super in depth quite yet. But everything that exists in the setting is meant to follow this very particular morality. And so most certainly doing that would be sinful. And in that case, I feel like there would have to be an addendum that if life is the one that takes it, you have to undergo a quest to, I don't know, prove that you can get it back. I haven't decided on that yet, because the numadas are very much a kind of still burgeoning concept within the world.
Or like earn one from somewhere else, just like the little stillborn baby got one.
You need to prove that you are better, that the true self is victorious over the metal shell that contains it. That metal shell, the ego, fighting to keep it back, and the true self must develop and grow strong enough to break free of that shell.
Is there anything else you wanted to talk about the system before we got into like the setting and how adventures work?
The system is very cool, and everybody should play it and pay me for it. Lots and lots and lots of money.
Of course.
Yes. That is what every person should do, ideally. Well, okay, but seriously, I really do think that the game is best engaged with, like, no barriers, because I think it exists in a unique place, at least in the minds of the people that do play it, as this test, this challenge to push you further. And that's really what it's all about, is that it is about surpassing your current limitations in whatever form they are and moving onwards past that grief and defeating it, in a sense. And you can't do that. You can't engage with it like that if you are still holding on to that idea, if you are still gripping that pain that you feel, you will not be able to let it go. And if you can't let it go, it will always own you.
Yeah.
That kind of agony and that pain and suffering, it can only be defeated by that proactive action. And, when darkness grows in a dark room with a candle, it's not because of the strength of that darkness, the shadows, it's because of that recession of the light. In many ways, no matter that pain or that agony, the methods of surpassing it are the same. The darkness becomes an enemy, quote unquote, that exists to stifle you. And the tools that you have to get past that are numerous but difficult to use. And that's why the game is meant to be so challenging and intense and aggressive and all that. You have to fight with your mind, your body, and your spirit all at once and engage with those tools and heal. That self-control, that fearlessness, the selflessness, and all of that, all the love for the world and all of the love for yourself and for others. That true empathy for everything and everybody around you is so difficult to maintain that kind of hope is supernatural almost. And that's what the mechanics strive to demand you to engage with, is to maintain that inner strength and push through and accomplish that goal, whatever it may be. It really is a battle that begins in the mind. The monsters of fear and impulse, of ego and of aggression, of revenge and regret and guilt and all those things. They're all beasts that consume you and defeat you before your battle ever even begins. And it makes sense then that everything in the world is meant to be reflective of that.
Yeah. This sounds very intense and intentional in how it's being intense. Like, I feel like a lot of more intense horror systems are sort of, gore and grimdark stuff, but this feels like it's more trying to not just be some sort of fun gore experience, but also be something that the players can engage with, and maybe not direct self-discovery, but sort of vicarious self-discovery.
Yeah. Thank you. I really do try to go for that, because I am filled with so much, I guess, joy for life, and I want to I want to, I guess, help others feel the same way that I do. But to do that, a person must first understand that life is suffering and that is why life is worth living. Um, the human mind is a kind of a strange thing in that sense, and I call it the struggle principle. Everything I write is founded on the concept that this reality, that this struggle begins in the mind, that the actions of words and others are painted by your mind, and their meaning can only be interpreted. How you interpret those words is a process determined by your mind and your worldview and your opinions and your emotions. And how you interpret those words will color those actions that you take and how you feel about that person and what they said and other things like that. It will change your world literally by causing you to feel and act differently. Now, if you apply that kind of tree of logic to every single thing in the world, that's kind of the basic start to it all. That when perceived, reality dictates itself. And that reality is often suckage. It is often bad and full of pain and horror and miserable things happening to trillions of people that you will never ever see or meet or think about in your entire life. Hundreds of thousands of miles away, and their perceived reality is probably thousands of times worse than ours, but these worlds that we view are, in a way, subjective. It doesn't really matter how materialistic and objective and scientific you want to try and be about it. Everything ultimately comes down to being subjective. Even theories and social structures, rumors and myths, and all kinds of countless other things and all that stuff. It's very muddy. We live in a very muddy dichotomy between man and the world. And a life is only so long. So when you die, when you're lying on that deathbed, will you really be thinking about how your atoms will disappear and fade away into dust and you will stop to exist? Or will you think about all of the memories and the emotions and the weight of your distinct different experiences and all of the meaning and depth that gave your life? What matters isn't where you are physically or what you are physically or anything of that sort. It's all upstairs and it's all in your chest, in your heart.
That's very well said. It feels hard to imagine this as like, for me, as a game that's fun in some way.
Oh, it's very fun. You don't really think about that kind of stuff while you're playing it. You think about like, fuck this GM, this guy sucks, this trap is bullshit, I hate everybody here, these people are stupid. That's usually what you're thinking, and that's very fun. But at the core of it all, it is about this microcosmic experience.
Well, yeah. Like I said, just like the intentionality of it, like trying to get that philosophical experience into something that can be, even understood with just a book, not necessarily a role-playing book, is difficult.
Oh, absolutely. I would like to think I've done it well enough because one of the game's biggest fans, shout out to you, Jeff. This man is very invested in all of that thematic allegorical stuff, and he's very on board with it, and he gets it, so to speak. So it's definitely there. It can be found.
I just remembered something I wanted to talk to you about the system before we move on to the setting, was that it seems very similar to a World of Darkness, like the storyteller system, where, like, and this was me just doing it from the survey, but from what you've described as well, where there's like two stats that are kind of in opposition to each other, and that would be Ilias and Guilt. And then you're sort of tracking different damage pools, so like the dread, and then your physical health, and then getting sometimes there's trauma stuff in World of Darkness as well. Like all of it seems very similar, where the World of Darkness is often trying to, simulate being a monster, where like, you have a monster impulses and then your human impulses, similar to how you have Guilt and Ilias, with Guilt being monster and Ilias being human, usually. I'm curious if that's influenced your design for the system at all.
So I'm going to be honest. I'm a bit of a poser. I don't even really know what World of Darkness is. I've heard a lot about it, and I don't know jack or shit really. I think like Vampire the Masquerade is like a World of Darkness thing, but that's
Yeah,
kind of it.
That's
I've
the biggest
never
one, yeah.
I've never played that. I don't know anything about World of Darkness. I imagine I'm not the first guy to have ideas like this, so I imagine there are a good amount of similarities.
Yeah, and it's similar enough that I feel like you could have taken your design intentions as I'm going to make my own World of Darkness supplement to satisfy this idea if you'd wanted to. But I mean, at this point, you've designed probably so many subsystems that that would no longer make sense.
Yeah,
But,
no, it wouldn't work. I don't think that would work at all, and I don't think it would work in, from what I've gathered, to be the World of Darkness setting, which is pretty robust and full, from what I've gathered.
yeah, not for the setting. No, absolutely not. Your setting is very different and would not function there. I just meant adapting the rule system.
Maybe one day I'll make a World of Darkness compatible framework. Who knows?
Yeah.
I've never been very interested in playing those games, really.
Yeah. Then don't.
Well, hey,
I was just curious if there was like some DNA in there that you brought in intentionally.
I am a servant of the people.
Yeah. Well, yeah. If people want it, sure.
Sure, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Let's rock on to the setting. And I assume we're starting at the Iris.
The Iris. Yes. So, the Iris is a lot of things. 20,000 years ago, the world of the game did not exist. It wasn't conceived of yet, and when it was, that was 20,000 years ago. When the players, the participants in the game master, whoever, play the game, the world is made real. When it's observed, it's made concrete. When it's made concrete, it begins to exist. It is a reality that begins literally in the mind and shifts and changes and warps based on the minds of the observer, both literally and subjectively. It is both quantum in a sense, in that it is, like every fictional world, real and not real. The demons, the angels, the characters, NPCs, the Iris, all of it. It's all part of that impermeable, invisible soup of the mind. The sylvan recesses of that place behind our eyes. The Iris is the start of that. It is the concept of observance. If I go into any more detail, I might spoil some of the fun. But that Iris is, period. Without it, nothing would be.
Okay. So if I'm understanding you correctly, the Iris is sort of what's observing the world, and we're going through the idea that the world needs to be observed to exist, and part of that ties in with the belief shapes reality idea that you've brought in, that I think is backed up by the sort of clinging on to life when you die, and then your body changing as you do that, or the pneumatism where as you lose your soul, you also lose like the physical things that make you.
Yeah. The world is meant to literally, and a lot of things about the setting itself are left kind of vague or in the open. There's no country names. The only real human faction is called the Ecclesia, and it's a monoculture, basically. It's all left kind of with gaps. And these are intentional gaps to be filled in by the characters in the world and the necessities of the players, in that the world reflects the thoughts and actions that you take as a player and as a character. This is how the Ilias system works, which it mechanizes, and that when you engage in the world in a more kind, empathetic, loving, gentle ways, the world reflects that and giving you more and more of that light and kindness in return. Ilias. That is the growth progression of the Ilias system, is that it is the world reflecting your goodness back to you. And the same thing with guilt. The higher your guilt is, the lower your Ilias is, and that is the world reflecting your wrongness, your evil, back at you. It is reading you like a book and writing the pages for you. The spaces left behind in what hasn't been written, of which there are some things that have yet to be written but are to be written, is intentional because it is a space for which the players to decide the reality that they need. if your character wants to be part of a separate sect cult of sun-worshipping people who exist in a separated society from the ecclesia, you are free to do that because there is that foundation of this person exists, therefore their history must exist, therefore that faction must exist. But the faction wasn't made first, and it doesn't invoke its will upon the players the same way. It is hard to kind of, I guess, explain because the openness of it is intentional, but it is also just like there's nothing there. So whether it's filled or not is dependent entirely on the GM and the table, and that's very risky for a setting because there's a lot of people that want the setting to inflict its will upon them and to dictate what they do for their character, not the other way around. And that is a pretty valid way of play, and that's why I think things like the Ecclesia need to exist, why Pandora's Labyrinth and the Centennier Driver in various locations and concepts and characters, angels and demons, need to exist to give that foundation. The Iris is kind of the start of that all.
A couple different questions there. So the idea of like a person, like a player wanting to play a particular type of character, and then you just saying, okay, yeah, sure, you can play that type of character, no matter what the background is. Within the universe, is that because, sure, whatever exists, and that's fine, but it also feels like within what you've described that could exist because a thought without a mind brings that culture into existence for the thought to have something that is thinking it?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. So it feels like usually when we think of like belief shapes reality, it's like I, as myself, Isaac, the host of the podcast, could will an ice cream into my hand because I want to have some ice cream right now.
Yeah, that's not at all how it works.
It's more like the idea of someone wanting to have ice cream. The idea of wanting ice cream wills ice cream into existence because it's an idea that can exist.
Not even that. Well, here's how I'll describe it. You, Mr. Isaac, it is possible for you to be eating ice cream within the next 2 hours. If you really want it, that is possible.
Sure.
This idea is that the concept begins with you 100%. Your history as a person exists in such a manner by which you, in 2 hours, are eating ice cream. That's a fact. That is a guaranteed 100% true fact because your player wrote it into your backstory. So, well, you know, you got to get the ice cream somehow. So there's a store, and that store exists, and you know it exists because there's a store, obviously, that you can drive to that probably has ice cream, and you've probably been there before. That store also exists, and that's a fact. So it is also a fact that within the next 2 hours, you will get in your car, drive to the store, and buy that ice cream, and then be eating it at home within that 2 hour time period. That is the process by which the world, I guess, reacts to the desires of the players, and the players, including the game master, are the ones that put that store there, put you here, and set up the scene so that you can have the ice cream.
Okay, so we're doing this sort of meta experiment where the entity that is willing something into existence is the player existing outside of the game, but within the game's perspective, it still is the player outside of the game, or however that's being interpreted by the individuals with the characters within the game.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, in the physical world, all of us people are separate, right? You and I are different people, and
right.
Me and everybody else, we're all, but we're all part of this same membrane of reality that is this world that we live in. We're both physical, we both exist in this, layer of idea of existence, of thought and of physicality. We can touch the things around us and we can think thoughts. We are conscious. We can access the noosphere, that kind of thing, right?
Yep.
And that is all in the game world, that is all imagined simultaneously, perhaps by separate creatures, but simultaneously, where each reality is just as real as the other, and each reality holds all of the characters. In the reality that you live in, I exist, and I am a quote-unquote character in that reality, and the same goes for everything. And that case is exactly the same for the people within this world. That reality is contained within the observations of the outside participants, us, when we're playing the game. We observe it and make it real to the in-world participants. Now, imagine that kind of a step down. The characters in the game observe the world and are part of this same membrane of reality. And to them, their world is just as real as our world is for us. Each real person in their world is separate, but they're all part of the same membrane of the game, the reality that is that experienced world. And what I've tried to do with this setting is to create the microcosm out of that macrocosm. Both have quote-unquote physical realities that both contain pain and joy, and both the mental worlds, and both have perceived spiritual worlds, if you believe in that stuff.
Right.
We can be sure that the constructed game reality has all of that stuff because it's written in the books and it exists in our minds and as words, as stuff that we know, right? But none of the people in that world can know for sure. None of them can be 100% certain of that much beyond their limited sciences and senses. Go up enough layers or go down enough layers, and eventually you fall into this concept of this fractal membrane of existence that continues up into and within itself infinitely. This fractal membrane contains everything that could ever, would ever, may ever, currently does, and will exist. And then some more. It contains all of that. And that, well, what do you call that? Could call it reality and be done with the idea. To me, at least, it feels a bit more than that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's the infinite reassurance that reality is congruent and existence, that this membrane is. It's guaranteed proof that existence is real because we experience it, and that's all the proof that we need. It's a self-referential, circular existence that can only be called one thing to me. That's God. So the reason why it's called the Ecclesia is because they follow that God. That was a bit of a tangent, but I hope you get me.
I'm close to it. It's a hard concept to grasp, and it's difficult to ensure that I have the same conception of it as you do because language is a imperfect way of transmitting information between two minds.
Oh, for sure.
And this is far more philosophical and cerebral than I was expecting to get today.
Well, that's the whole point.
Yeah. It's a bit of a swing for the settings that I usually talk about, but I mean that by itself is pretty cool. So I'm having a good time.
Well, I'm honored. I am too.
How does this connect back to the iris, or is that something that you're trying to not explicitly state?
So, here's what I'll say, right? All this stuff about the people in the game observe the world and therefore it's real. Woo, magic. It's just like real life. All that shit, it's gotta start somewhere. Somebody, somewhere, has to observe the character to observe the world. That somebody is the iris. And that iris is a person. Not in the real world. Well, okay, let me rephrase that. It is a role. A duty that is fulfilled in the real world. But that I will not disclose. But it is real. And that iris is the start of everything. It is both a kind of God and not.
Okay. From your survey, it seemed to me like it was some sort of physical thing within the world that there was Earth that existed as however it was, and then the iris came along and it's some giant space station kind of eye looking thing that's floating in space and looking at the world, and that feels like a good interpretation.
That is what that is. I mean, I wouldn't really describe it as a space station, but
yeah,
it is a big celestial body still in the sky, and in the game you can look up there and you can see it. It's it's not very big in the sky, but it's big realistically.
Okay.
And that kind of I'm not going to say kind of, that is the linchpin. That is, the world reflects the literal mental reality of your actions and thoughts as a player and as a character. It is this surreal nightmare-scape, and it is that because it is reflecting the thoughts and ideas of the participants. And those thoughts and those ideas, guided by the written word and by the perceived word of their GM, that creates the reality as dictated by the book. But that reality is still physical. The characters in the game are physical. The I is. The ecclesia is. There's people that sweat and bleed and cry and die.
Right, yeah. So the iris is the sort of nebulous thing, but it is physical.
Yeah.
And then the people within the world are physical within the world, obviously, until they have a super high alias stat, it seems like.
I mean, I would say that you can become a ghost, I guess. It's not in the rules of the game, but theoretically it's possible to become non-physical in the game, I guess.
All right, no, not important, but okay, and then you have Earth, and then below Earth you have the Labyrinth. What is the Labyrinth?
So, I won't say directly, but you know that mind state that you get in? I don't know if you know I mean, I imagine you do. It's a pretty universal sensation, but when it feels like you've lost everything and you're laying in bed and you can hardly move your own muscles, and it's like reality itself melts away around you and you're in a waking dream.
Not frequently, but yeah.
So it's that as a place. It is the place that you go to when you have nothing else, when all of your love and care and joy in the world has been taken from you, and there is nothing left for you in this material plane. It is the place that you go when there is no place for you on the earth anymore. It's not an afterlife. You don't die when you, I mean, you might die when you go there, but you don't die to get there. And you go there kind of willingly.
Okay. Because belief is shaping reality, when you feel like you no longer belong on the earth, you go to the Labyrinth.
It is this drawing force that pulls you there. It has no explicit entrance, no big gate of Pandora that you go in with the big staircase. It is a hole in the floor, a strange opening in the back of a closet that you crawl into. It is a big sinkhole that pulled 4 people into it in the center of a city street. It is a thing that consumes.
This has reminded me of Coraline, where there's the little door that she uses to get to the button world that is sometimes just closed because whatever rules dictate when it's opened.
Yeah, the big line of thought for me is The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Uh-huh.
That was not really an inspiration for me, but a kind of through line I noticed of the inexplicable opening that beckons to you and calls for you to enter and brings you into a whole new world of adventure and wonder. It's that, but depressive. It calls for you, it beckons for you, it strives to have you, it desires you, and you have nothing else. So the assumption is that calling, that pull, it captures you, it gets you, and that's the main conceit of the game. The game, as it exists, assumes that you've already entered the Labyrinth when you're playing it, although I do plan for there to be a Surface World hex crawl rules supplement that supports Surface World play more definitely than the 100% raw dungeon crawling rules of the game itself.
So, I mean, that seems to indicate that you're sort of by necessity playing a character that's depressed. Is that the idea?
Not necessarily depressed, but within a state of mental regression and suffering, yeah. The default is that every character that is played starts off some kind of fucked up, some kind of ill or traumatized or unhappy. Even right. In potentially superficial manners, really, the only thing that's stated in the book is that you have to have nothing left. If you've got nothing left, then whoop-de-doo, you're here now. There is a little bit of contrivance, and I feel like on surface world games, there's a lot more room for like, oh, do we go? Do we not? Like, how does it feel? How it feels to enter the labyrinth by choice without necessarily needing to kind of zoom out of the Psychomortis rule set and just kind of put it together yourself as a game master.
Mm-hmm.
But that experience itself is, I would love to say it's kind of codified in that it is a beast that consumes you. You are swallowed whole by the labyrinth and taken by it.
So in your survey, you sort of mentioned how Earth had changed with like demons and angels, and now I'm sort of, is there a lot that you've examined about how Earth is different?
Oh, absolutely. So the way that Earth, I guess, is different is that, like I said, it's all kind of a surrealistic nightmare place where there should be no, not should be, but there isn't any standard forest. There's no mountain range. There are deserts of salt and of blood red sand, and forests of meat and screaming limbs, and jungles of fractalized checker patterns, and oceans of glass and of, I don't know, sulfur or any funny liquids you can think of, really. It is all this quantum kind of thing that exists in this warped perversion of what nature should be like. The surface world is apocalyptic with horrifying, I guess you could call it weather that dots the landscape as just generally not fun stuff to get caught into. And of course, the previously mentioned machine towers, crafted by the inexplicable influence of demons, and the few and irregular strongholds and tower cities of the Ecclesia, the general ruling society and the most powerful, I guess you could call it a country, but it's not really a country. It is a culture, a concept that exists in no particular place, but rather simply is as the idea of a location. The Ecclesia is a very powerful, I'll call it an organization for now. I'll call it an organization or a society. It's a very powerful society that is run with their extremely advanced technologies that have been reverse engineered from the machines crafted by demons. These technologies are chiefly the catalyst, a metallic structure that is built and implanted and plugged into the upper backs and shoulders of particularly skilled or capable members of the Ecclesia. These catalysts can be used to manipulate parts of reality that other people simply cannot. A common application is to use catalysts as methods of powering machines or of transferring energies or of just general use. They were invented by, I guess you could say, the caste of surveyors who are typically adventure scientists. They have mapped the planet in all of its changes. They have mapped countless other scientific discoveries. They invented the catalyst. They're machiners and engineers and alchemists. Very, very smart people generally.
So if I'm understanding it correctly, because belief influences reality, this is a way to more, the catalyst is a way to more directly harness that idea and concept so that you can will things into existence.
It is the manipulation of emotional energy to, like you said, more potently execute desired realities. The way that a catalyst works and the way that all machines work is running through adrenaline. Now, adrenaline for catalysts is pulled from the bloodstream. Adrenaline is then pushed and coursed through the bloodstream and maintained at a standard level that allows for the catalyst to call upon it at any time. This is kind of you could call it your mana bar, almost. Your adrenaline is how thick your blood pumps through your body. And it can't store it really, but it can certainly inject a lot into you and make you kind of freak out sometimes. And they're very powerful. A lot of machines don't use blood. That would be stupid and dumb. What they do instead is they will inject, or not inject, but they will extract adrenal I don't know, liquids, whatever. I haven't put much thought into the actual science of it, but they will extract raw power from corpses or from life and use it to power the machines, essentially in a method of energy transference, in a way creating energy vampires themselves.
Yeah, I was thinking that sounded pretty similar to what pneumatic people are like.
The Ecclesia are a religious foundation. Like I said, they believe in the fractal god, I suppose you could say. And they use Christian iconography, mostly because that's very similar to what many people are familiar with. But also partially, I guess, as a personal response to the whole church bad thing that a lot of fantasy worlds have. I've long been kind of sick of this idea that religion is a fundamentally bad thing and that like churches and priests can never be good. So the Ecclesia I would describe as mostly morally gray. They harness evil and use it for good. Their great technologies are responsible for the safety of normal everyday people who use their technologies and get to live in a relative comfort in this horrible world because of the fact that the Ecclesia is capable and willing to protect their people and themselves. The Ecclesia often do this with the use of their catalysts, as well as like there's monster hunting bands of consecutors or like the mentioned ecclesiastic Templars who will defend the outer lands and maintain relative peace and safety amongst the populace. Their exmodocs are very skilled surgeons and often are the people that will install the plugins that the catalysts need to go into for somebody to have one. And that is worth noting, is that a surgery must be done for somebody to receive a catalyst in the first place. As in the game, you could swap out catalysts willy-nilly. The way that this functions is that a catalyst requires a series of ports. It comes with wires and plug-in positions and things like that that you can plug into a body. And to make a body ready for that, you need exmodocs, who are engineers and doctors, surgeons, to manufacture a port for the catalyst to go into. And thusly, the consecutors then use these catalysts to better protect the populace. You could make arguments about how it seems likely that the Ecclesia are doing something bad by harnessing this evil power and creating energy vampires, and you wouldn't be wrong. You wouldn't be wrong. But their goals, at least as written right now, are largely for the good of the people. Though there's a lot of room for bad actors, I will say that much.
Okay. So if you have demons and angels and that kind of stuff, and with sort of Catholic iconography for the Ecclesia, are they connected to the demons and angels, or are they more like outside of that within what they're doing?
So there is a lot of set dressing and a lot of concepts in the game that push it towards a very Christian philosophy. I don't consider myself a Christian. I don't consider the game to be a Christian or Catholic entity. I don't believe that it or myself have faith in any particular god with any name, and I do not worship Yahweh. But there exists the concept in people in general of angels and of demons. And these demons and angels take literal form through their Isrogors, basically. They take form and become because people need them to be. People need for there to be a demon to fight, and there needs to be an angel to fight it. That is kind of what I was going on about with the whole Labyrinth thing, in that angels and demons by default don't take physical forms. They kind of can't unless they need to, but that's a whole different thing. So the belief in goodness and in people and in others manifests these figures throughout mythology and history, demigods or like angels and demons, and these figures manifest within the minds of people. One of the most powerful, most potent, most prolific, and most important is Calidbolg, the demon of fear. He exists as a concept within the minds of quite literally every person, animal, creature, and plant that exists. He is everywhere. And that evil, that fear, is the source of the suffering of the world. All of the fear embedded into the very raw material of the space is what transforms it into the surrealistic nightmare that it is.
Okay, so I mean, that feels somewhat recursive, like people are scared, so then they create an environment that's scary, but that just is reinforces that.
Exactly.
Okay. What was the first scary thought?
The first scary thought was likely not written, but if you really want to push the Catholic imagery and concepts, it was likely, I wonder what's in this apple, and I wonder how it tastes.
Yeah, probably I shouldn't have eaten that apple afterwards within that, but yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I'm not, I don't really think of it like that, so.
Yeah. That doesn't matter. Something I was thinking about for demons and like the belief shaping reality is it feels like a lot of people don't view demons as a mental threat and more often as a physical one. So why, with that in mind, would they not exist physically? Same for angels.
So the main logic with that flow, externally, above the board, because that's kind of lame. But below the board, the actual reason is because these ideas are, how do I say this? When a Christian thinks of the devil making them do something, they don't think that the devil literally reached over their shoulder and made them do the thing. They think that the devil acted through their hands. That's it. These entities are personified and then made to act through others. The only exception to this is, like I mentioned, the mythological figure of Caliburn, who is the angel of man and manifests physically exclusively because he is the concept of like the goodness of man. So he is made physical by the existence of humanity, but the other angels of love and of guidance and of those kinds of things are not, because those are ephemeral concepts that humans enact themselves. But for a human to act, a human must exist. And so for the angel of man to act, the angel of man must exist.
Well, why would this exclude, like, God being formed? Because I feel like with you saying, like, angels are basically just good spirits and demons are kind of like bad spirits, a lot of the, like, more polytheistic gods you could explain as being angels in one way or another. But, like, the Abrahamic God feels like that's this level of power beyond that is believed in, so it should exist somehow, but have enough powerful influence, I feel like, that it could change things much more drastically.
Well, that's because God is. God is the land and the people and the literal being. The iris is the method by which God executes the world. So God does exist physically. And I guess, yeah, you're right, that is an exception, because that physicality is literally everything. It is all of the ideas, all of the thoughts, all of the material reality, and everything in between. The air that the characters breathe, the ground they walk on, the weapons they wield, the monsters they fight. God is all of it.
Well, now we're entering the theodicy problem, but I'm not sure if we want to address that here.
Well, it's a whole thing. And the thing is that I've written this to follow a particular idea, but everything that I'm saying about the angels and the demons and like the energies and the way that it flows, I personally chalk it up to my interpretation of the setting. The way that I view a lot of this is that Psychomortis and the world at large is revealing itself to me, and I have to interpret it and execute it on its behalf.
Okay.
So all of this, I'm always changing my opinion on and changing my mind on because I'm trying to interpret and reinterpret what I feel I've found, not what I've created.
I see.
I do truly feel that at least the game exists as an entity separated from myself, and I'm at least 60% sure that it manifests as an Ysregor specifically to fuck with my players and make them roll really badly. Because that, like, it's a known phenomena of, like, oh, you know, the dice always screw you until the one moment or whatever. It's like, you know, all that nonsense. But it's, like, extra potent with this game. It's so potent that, like, everybody that's played the game has felt it and commented on it. So
I guess you've touched on something that connects people across different, boundaries. It's cool.
Well, thank you.
Why did you go with Pandora's Labyrinth for the name of the labyrinth?
So all of this is kind of not really a holdover, but it draws its roots from a very, very, very old setting that I was trying to do a long, long time ago. And the only real thing that's remained is this concept of an infinite labyrinth that all evil comes from, called Pandora's Labyrinth. And I've long since thought that I had ought to change the name, but I've since decided against it, specifically because Pandora's Labyrinth, one could describe the arrival of the Iris as the coming of Pandora's Labyrinth and the realization of evil. That is when evil became real and manifested on the earth literally and, destroyed billions and trillions of lives and societies and who knows what else, right? And most chiefly, in the story of Pandora, the last thing that came out of Pandora's box was hope. And since this setting, this whole game is about love and empathy and hope for others and for oneself and a willingness to fight for what's good, I think it's fitting that in I guess you could say the primary setting, like the primary location of the most of the gameplay being in Pandora's Labyrinth, it makes sense that at the bottom of Pandora's Labyrinth, well, if I say that, I might be spoiling a bit too much. But you get the idea.
Yeah, okay. In your survey, you mentioned, I think I'm saying this, Ozira.
Oh, Oriza? Yeah.
Oh, did I get it backwards? Okay. Oriza.
So, Oriza is a physical thing that exists behind the walls of the first few layers, one could call them, of the labyrinth. It is a gigantic entity of meat and pulsing body and bones. It has veins layered in black chitinous materials, and it bleeds, blood, and its meat is rejuvenating. Within the denizens of the labyrinth and the survivors of it, they will eat her flesh and the hairs that grow on it, as well as the crystals that excrete from her liquids, and the hairs that grow on those to maintain themselves. That is a source of rejuvenation and health. She has various organs and entities, and one of her chief traits is that her organs will excrete a kind of mist-like substance, pale and white, that collects around souls and collects around people, identities and individuals, and will push away the evil that exists in the labyrinth. It is a repellent to entities like hyperterrestrials or the checkerboard jesters, who are all examples of energy vampires and machine elves and the like.
Mm-hmm.
And so these entities, so to speak, reject that life, that pulsing energy, that motion. Within Pandora's Labyrinth, Oriza is the source of sustenance and of life. She is a spirit but she can only manifest within the labyrinth, because that is the only place where her body can exist in such a manner that it is conceptually there.
I was noting a parallel between her and what the demons are doing by turning everything into machines, and she feels more like flesh thing where there shouldn't be a flesh thing, sort of the opposite.
Yeah. That's an interesting parallel to draw, actually, because she doesn't really spread. She's not an infection. She doesn't really, she has a body that grows, so to speak, but that body stays within its rights and bounds, and it provides. She is a caring mother. She is a calm word. She is a warm bed. She is all of those things manifested as a horrible, gross flesh monster that has people eating wall pubes and shit like that. So, it is a horror game still. But she is ultimately a force of good. And some people in the Labyrinth worship her as a god, of which one could argue that she is, but...
What made you want to include something like that in the game? Like, it feels like from a sort of game perspective, oh, this is how people recover resources that they expend, but you don't necessarily need to have that be from a horrid fleshy wall thing.
Well, I'll actually walk you through the full thought process, and funnily enough, this is how most of my thought processes go. I am as utilitarian as I am autistic and, well, I can't exactly say artful considering what I'm about to say. So, the original intention was just, I need something to put in this game that lets you heal a little bit and lets you restore some adrenaline that's very easy to find and very low intensity. But also, I'm making a horror game, so I have to make it weird. You know what would be crazy? Like, I've played video games where there's, grass coming up from in between bricks. What if it was that, but, gross and all over the place? So, it came through as stoneblood hair, which would grow in the cracks of stones and off of Ariza's meat. They would grow from those cracks, and this is hair. It's got the taste of sinew and the texture of pubic hair, and you have to eat about a clump, and it restores you about 1d4 of whatever value it is, right, of whatever you're healing. So you've got stoneblood hair, which is wall pubes, then you've got crystal blood hair. Now, the logic here was, all right, well, magic characters, at the time it was magic, it's kind of different now, need a way to regenerate their blue bar. So, well, it makes sense to have a blue material, I guess, so whatever. It was super lazy, I just slapdashed it all together. And so, crystals. Crystals were an asset I had in my map maker at the time. And I was like, fuck it, we'll do crystals. And, it's... The idea went, well, this is kind of similar to the stoneblood hair. What if it's crystals on the hair, or hair on the crystal, so you cut off this glass-like pubic substance, and you eat that, and that's crystal blood hair, and that restores your now adrenaline. But then, okay, crystals, liquids, where does that come from? What's something gross? Chitinous black veins that pulsate and get sick and ooze pus, and you try to break it open to get access to the nice juicy stuff inside, and it spurts acid in your face, and it's gross and tastes like actual shit. And the intention was to be gross first, and also I had a priest NPC, and I wanted it to be a little bit weird, and I wanted this to feel like an alien place for the players. So I originally, what's I don't know. What's a weird thing this guy can worship? Well, something has to be growing from that meat stuff in the wall, so what if it's that? It needs a name. What is a cool name, and what can I mess with it? Or mess about it, right? So I started with Eliza, and I put that through multiple, I guess, rounds of translative restructuring in how it would be pronounced. And I ended up with the Japanese way of saying it, which would be Ariza. And then Ariza, well, that sounds a little bit, that's just obviously a stereotype, I guess. So Oriza. Boom, you've got Oriza. It's a unique name with kind of a funny origin, I guess. And now you've got this big, freaky flesh creature in the walls, and that makes sense for a horror game. And eventually, I managed to wrap that up into a nice bow, as it's a specific entity that exists as a concept and exists in such a manner that the players interact with her both literally and non-literally. In the rules, there's this framework of a safe room system where there's like a specific room, usually a secret, that is typically safe and will reward the players with a double long rest, a full rest, if they take a rest in it. And that's like a super valuable resource. So it makes sense. You've got the mist stuff. There's your safe room. And boom, there you go. Weird eldritch flesh god in the ground. Now, what I will say is that the players of this game have spoken with words to Oriza, and she has responded. This has happened many, many times. But they don't know that. But I know that my players are going to be watching this, or I guess listening to this, and I don't want to spoil some fancy stuff for them.
Well, I had two thoughts going through that. One of them is that your description of like starting with the hair and then the crystals and then the meat, and then the name. It's this very organic building of your setting, like starting with small pieces and moving up, and the fun using of the word organic there. My second thought on it was that it's interesting that you picked a word that's associated with food already. Oriza is the type of fungus that's used for making soy sauce.
Oh, is it?
It's spelled differently, but it's pronounced the same way.
I didn't know that. That's very cool.
It's a fungus that's also used in biological production of a lot of different medicines, actually, where you can alter it to start producing medicine instead of fermenting stuff. So I used to use it at one of my old jobs.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's pretty cool stuff. You have accidentally named it after something that produces medicine, and it's kind of what it does in the game.
Nice, yeah. Well, I've had many fun moments where, I will describe the intense gasoline flavor of the hairs as they get stuck in your teeth and tumble down your throat, and it's like there's been a lot of fun moments of players being like fuck, dude, this is. Imagine eating I would never want to fun bits of I'm so glad I'm not this dude right now, because the idea, I guess, of needing to eat basically hair for or you'll die is horrible, at least for me. I've never understood those girls in school that would chew on their hair. Ugh, no, I could never. I've had long hair for many years before, and I've never understood that.
Yeah, my wife does that, and no, not a fan. But I feel like we all have little gross habits that help us calm down.
Have you ever
one way or another?
What? I think I've asked multiple people what the joy of it is, and the answer is usually the texture. I guess, I don't know. People are weird, but it's part of what makes us wonderful.
Mm-hmm. When I was a kid, I liked licking my knees to help myself calm down.
That's when I was a kid, I really liked yogurt. I loved yogurt. I loved it a lot.
It's more socially acceptable.
I loved yogurt, but I called it yuck.
Yeah, okay.
And it took my dad a long time to figure that out. Yeah.
All right. I got a few more things I wanted to wrap up about the monsters. You'd mentioned jesters and hyperterrestrials, and those are separate from demons, right?
They're people have described them as demon spawn. That's not true. They are, in a way, energy vampires. They're multidimensional entities that exist as kind of both spiritual guides and opponents. It's the kind of scenario where you've got the teacher that's very stern and aggressive and like, oh, if you can't do this, then you'll never make it. And then at the end of the class, the protagonist is like, oh, but like, Sensei, I don't know if I can do it. And then the teacher's like, oh, but you can defeat me. Have at you. And they fight. And then the student defeats the teacher and is like, oh, good job. You can go and fight the bad guy. It's like that. Except the teacher is extremely, extremely aggressive, tries to kill you a lot, plays very, very unfairly, makes fun of you for being unhappy, and just generally feeds off of your suffering. So it's like a bad teacher.
Yeah, kind of like Q from Star Trek Next Gen.
Kinda, yeah. And the jesters and the hyperterrestrials are kind of different layers of the same concept. The jesters require a lower Ilias score to, I guess, unlock, and they're generally weaker. They're about like level 3 to level 7 monsters, not even level 6 monsters or so. They fight very aggressively. They're fast, they're agile, they can teleport, and they mock you relentlessly. They're jesters. They mock and make light of the suffering of the world and the ignorance of people, and they're awake to the truth of the world, and they find it very funny, and they hate you for not finding it funny. But the hyperterrestrials are a lot closer to animals. They are literal, multidimensional, higher dimensional entities that feed off of energy. And similar to how we would consume plants or meat for our energy, these things consume suffering and agony. So their goal is to cause as much of it as possible. Hyperterrestrials are, one could argue, perhaps one method by which evil is manifested, as they not being very physical entities most of the time and simply not observable to 99% of reality, exist above us but can perceive us as we are 3D, but they are 5, 6D, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
And so their presence causes people to kind of act differently, act separately. It can influence our minds and our behavior. And oftentimes they will use this to farm us for our emotional energy. If you've ever met somebody who seems really like low on energy, always tired and depressive, never, excited about anything, no zest for life, usually somebody like that would have a hyperterrestrial attached to them, a parasitic entity that consumes their energy and shrinks them down into nothing. Those are two of I guess you could say, the monster factions. That's two of them. The third one is, of course, the robots, the machines. There exists a location within the Labyrinth called the Centinier Driver. It is a large machine tower that exists within the Labyrinth as this impermeable, unreachable entity that seems to control everything. And it is where the machines come from. It is a machine itself. It pulses with that same life, and the machines are its avatar that strive to dictate what you do, how you do it, how you behave, exactly what it is that you do. They are controllers.
That's the machine itself because it's in opposition to truth, because I feel like that's how machines are implemented with the pneumatism and the demon side of stuff.
Mm-hmm. It is opposition to truth.
Okay. I can see that. There's one other question I had that was based off of something you said in your survey about how demons can like supernaturally invert truth. And I wasn't quite sure what you meant by that. Like, I've seen like what the machines and like how that connects to people's inner truth, but I wasn't sure what a inverted truth would mean and how that would be implemented in the game. Can you explain that?
Well, it would really be more of a setting thing, as in a game it would be probably just like something like a lie or some, there's different ways to implement it, but it would be just as mistruthful as a lie would be. And inverted truth, and all of this discussion about inverted truth, is that it is like right is wrong, red is blue, up is down, north is south. that kind of thing where a demon would, like Calico would, through the use of their, I guess, distinct nature, Calico's being fear, would convince somebody that something that is true isn't, or that something that isn't true is. It would manifest as a form of self-delusion or self-deception. So if you've got this narcissistic, horrible abuser, right, who is 100% in their mind and genuinely in their heart, 1000% convinced that they are the victim and that they are lashing out as the victim for whatever reason, that would be the work of a demon. That would be the inverted truth that they are the abuser creating victims. And in their mind, that exists as the opposite.
I've met some people like that.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure a lot of people have. And that's the thing.
Yeah.
That is the work of a demon whose name may not be known, whose essence may not be understood, but exists and manipulates and changes the mind against rightness.
Yeah, and that's similar to how a lot of other people have conceptualized demons, like you said, of like this, devil on your shoulder telling you to do bad things.
Yeah, it's generally a very Christian interpretation in that, like, evil is the inversion of truth, that kind of logic.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, honestly, I think the most tame implementation of that concept in the setting.
Well, yeah, should say so. So how does an actual session, or set of sessions play out? So, like, players are down in the labyrinth, and what are the monsters they're facing? How do those make them, face their inner fears and that kind of stuff?
All right, so I don't actually have any session-by-session write-ups, but what I do have are my memories, and those are good enough. So, If I recall, I once ran a good 5-session long mini adventure with a group of some new players, some old. And the premise was they've been called upon by the Ecclesia to go into the labyrinth and find a lady that has gone in there and fallen. The opening hasn't closed yet. It's still there. And so they go down and the game starts. And moment-to-moment gameplay, what you're doing is mostly like... So I play with a virtual tabletop fully active battle map of the dungeon with fog of war and stuff. Mm-hmm. And so most of the actual moment-to-moment gameplay is moving around the rooms and examining what's in them and trying to figure things out. In their first room, for example, there were a series of doors, 6 of them to be exact, and a pool of water at the end. Not a pool of water, but like a fountain at the end. At the end of the room, the fountain was moving as though it had water pouring into it from an oxidized copper gargoyle head above it, but there was no water flowing into the pool. It was simply moving on its own. The water was ice cold, and each of the doors had a torch on them. And so, they go to a door, and they open it, and they examine the next space and the next space. And generally, when the players are moving around the different rooms and examining the things in them, discovering the dungeon themselves, the GM would be rolling tension dice and deciding monster locations and moving things around behind the board. So as the game goes on, the DM would roll a tension dice with a current tension value being decided by the character's current actions. So let's say the party's been active for a while. They haven't really engaged in too much combat lately. They haven't found any traps, so it's been very chill. They haven't heard anything except for a couple footsteps maybe to the north a little bit ago. And the DM rolls, and the roll is 17, like I did just now. That would mean, well, nothing happens, but maybe there's a scream from a long way down the hallway. And that's dictated by the tension dice. Maybe that scream came from a person or a monster trying to bait them, whatever. The tension dice decided that something happened. So they go and they look for the scream, and then you roll the tension dice. And since it's been a very long time, the tension value is high. I rolled a 7 just now. That would mean a combat encounter. So that scream was actually a monster trying to bait the players into a trap. And wha-bam, you get into combat, and that's a good 30-minute endeavor or so. And when you're done with combat, you dish out experience or whatever, and maybe the players are like, all right, let's be more, suspicious now. Let's be more careful. So instead, they'd be going around and they'd be changing their movement styles. Maybe they were moving in a patient manner, which would mean that they gain bonuses to passive perception, but nothing else. So maybe they switch to stalking. They turn down the lights a little bit and they move slower, quieter, double the frequency of tension rolls, but guaranteed safety if they do find something, because that means that they're moving slower, they spot it. And let's say they move up to a door and they put their ear to it and they hear shuffling and some whispering on the other side. It doesn't sound like human whispering, but man, there's probably monsters in there. Then you'd get into a kind of tactical engagement where the players decide, how can we enter this room? Do we need to enter the room? Can we leave it behind? And throughout all of this happening, the characters are battling with consistently raising and lowering dread levels. As you hear the scream, your dread would raise. As you get into a fight and get hit with a crit or something, a high damage roll, your dread goes up. And the best way to lower dread is through roleplay, to just roleplay out your character interacting with somebody next to them, stressing the fuck out about something. So I don't know, somebody pats you on the shoulder, you're doing good, it's all right, we're all on board, and that lowers some dread a little bit, and you go on, and you're at this door, and maybe one of the magic classes is like, all right, I've got a buff I can give everybody, and we're gonna open the door, throw a grenade in, and then bust in. And that's the plan, and so you give out the buff, and that kind of, everybody has a plan, so that's lowered dread a little bit, but you enter the room, and oh no, it's a big spider. And so one of the characters is afraid of spiders, and that spider leaps on that guy, and all of a sudden he's freaking out, and there's, the dread rate, gets higher and higher, and he starts to freak out more. And upon completing the encounter, the character, I guess, would then be given the decision of to engage in a compulsion. The compulsions are one of the main ways that players who don't want to roleplay, or players who don't care to, I guess, will be lowering their dread. And a compulsion is just some kind of negative habit that calms somebody down at the cost of themselves or others. So let's say I'll try not to be too edgy with it, but like, for example, it's, I don't know, a non-responsive shutdown. So this guy just kind of falls to the ground and sits on his back and just stops talking and just shuts down completely. Now he's no longer an asset. He has to be like this for a good long while, and that raises his guilt. Now, say, for example, one of the other players sees this, and his character tries to be like, "Oh man, let's help you out, man. Like, what's up? What's wrong?" And they try to discuss and reach out. That might raise an Ilias or lower some guilt. And there are other methods, of course, to raise Ilias. In fact, it's listed pretty explicitly, I believe. Let's say, for example, later on in that same session, or maybe a few sessions later, a different character suffers a terror, and to guarantee a survival, they charge their object of obsession with it. Right? They don't want to risk dying, so they put all of that into their object, and they hold on to it, they grip it, and they close their eyes, cover their ears, la la la, none of this is happening. I'm in my my nice fantasy world where my wife is in bed with me, and everything is nice and comfortable, and none of this is happening, and it's not real, and you would gain some guilt, because that's a self-destructive behavior. But later on, a different character gets inflicted with terror and takes the risk, and he raw dogs that shit, and he thugs it out, and assuming he survives, he didn't retreat to his comfort zone. He was confronted with this fear and fought it head on and succeeded. With his skill and willpower and his wisdom, he defeated that kind of inner fear, and thus he gains Ilias. A similar process happens when characters invest in their virtues. Particularly if you're not a Numata, every time you reach a level bracket, you can mess with your vices and virtues chart, and that lets you raise your virtues, and that gets you some Ilias, and that reflects in your character's behavior, because it gets you more and larger rewards for engaging with those virtues. And a character that is a Numata, for example, literally can't do that. They become very sinful and have to fill in their vices side instead. And so that character can't gain Ilias because there's no virtues to engage with. And until they change, become a better person, that won't be the case. That kinds of thing as well. Episodes in particular, if a character, for example, is faced with a scenario that reminds them of their terror, or not their terror, their trigger, or some other backstory trait that isn't intense enough for a trigger a terror trigger, a DM or the player can invoke an episode that causes a character to lash out and act out, and that has to be played out. And usually it comes with the cost of either dread gain, or if you resist the episode and you don't lash out and you maintain your self-control and your self-composure and you engage in proper self-supportive and self-loving tactics to avoid it, you gain Ilias. So the general process is that the world will inflict suffering on you, and you can choose to either take an easy route or a hard route. The hard route rewards Ilias, and the easy route keeps you alive.
All right, yeah, thank you. That was a great run through of however many sessions that would be, but like of the different concepts within a play, yeah.
That 5-game little mini adventure I ran ended with all of the characters dying permanently, except for one, who found the lady, fought the demon, didn't purify her, then tried to bring her to the surface and was trapped inside because the demon that was attached to her body parasitically had messed with reality and locked them inside the labyrinth.
Oh, great.
No, they got the bad ending.
Yeah, sounds like it.
But that is the process.
I've reached the end of my set questions here, so is there anything else you wanted to talk about, the game or the setting?
It's all very in progress right now. Game itself is in like 0.9 alpha version right now. And I'm working on the gamma version now as well. And of course the redraft. I'm not a very great artist, but I'm working on my skills to make good art for the game. So I'm hoping that at some point I will have a huge portfolio of all kinds of cool stuff, but I'm still working on it. I'm very not happy with my output, but that is the life of a solo dev. I don't have any artists or writers or editors. I don't think I could trust anybody to work on this and align themselves with what I guess I'm discovering.
Yeah, this feels like it'd be hard to bring someone else in for the writing portion.
Especially the writing.
Yeah, the art portion, I think you could probably find someone, but the writing is, yeah, very, very difficult for someone to have exactly the same ideas and implementation as you're trying to accomplish here.
Yeah, most certainly. I mean, with the art, I feel like I feel like I could not describe what I want the art to be like to somebody sufficiently without just doing it myself. So if I had to, I take a lot of inspiration from Mike Mignola and Yasuhiro Naito, who made Hellboy and Trigun, respectively.
Mm-hmm.
And so visually, those are my two biggest inspirations. But there's just a lot that I can't phrase as words. I'm a very visual thinker, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, you'd be surprised how well some people are able to match what you want visually.
Yeah, kind of attach onto a particular idea. I've seen that before. Yeah, there are some very, very wonderful artists out there that are good at that kind of thing.
But yeah, finding the right artist for your project, I'm sure there's one out there, but finding them is, a challenge.
Yeah, there is one. His name is Yasuhiro Naito.
Yeah,
and
sure, yeah,
yeah. He's like, how old is he? 80? Who knows? We could know.
And get one of the people that worked on the new Trigon series.
Surely you jest.
Yeah, no, yes, I do. That would not fit.
No, I don't think it would. But also, man, this game is hard. It's hard to design for and write for and play in the good way, but it really takes a lot out of you, man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I a part of me fears. So actually, at one point, somebody had said that, and I still talk to this guy. He's a friend of mine actually, but he said that he felt like there was something evil bound to the book, and he physically couldn't read it. I feel so bad for that poor man because, I believe him. Like it's a scary game, not because of the content, but because of the, I guess, the magnitude of what it is hard to grapple with as a consumer. It's like trying to eat a handful of goat heads. If you're familiar with like the little sticker burrs.
Yeah.
That's what it's like sometimes. I mention it a lot, really. I do. I hold on to that evil energy binding thing a lot because it showed to me that the potency of the setting in the game is so strong that it can cause reactions like that. Because one of my friends, shout out to Jeff again, is going to be running another session of this and is going to be like playing this with people. I've tried to kind of advise against playing this game more than once a week because each session is so full and draining that I fear it might be deleterious to people's health because of how intense it can be, especially if you're like a blood and tears role player that gets super into it. It can be a lot because it's talking about very intense subjects and the characters are all meant to be very, difficult, I suppose. And it is a project made out of love, but I do fear that negative energy might be too strong or too potent for me to comfortably put this game to market. Like I am a very superstitious person. But I try to be very logical and reasonable about it. I know logically nothing is going to happen, but a part of me still says, I don't know if I want to put this out because something bad might happen. And I don't want to be responsible for that. But I'm sure it'll be fine. I'm sure it will be. And it will do what it will do, I suppose.
I feel like it's something that can bring about positive change to people as well, like it's not necessarily always going to be some like negative influence on people's life just because it's a horror introspective experience.
I think that the role that Psychomortis is meant to play in a person's life as like a concept, I guess, is that negative depressive phase of that introspection and that horror of existence and the realization of suffering. And that's what it embodies and what it's about and what it executes without fear. And I think that I am the weak link of this transference because I am afraid of what this game is. I'm afraid of it. But, Demon of Fear, it's in everything, I suppose. So I try to push through, but there's, I do have a good amount of, I guess, doubts about it. I'm sure it'll be fine, but I hope I don't have to eat those words someday.
Yeah, I was thinking fine might not be the perfect word for what it would be, but it'll be I think it'll be something that you'll be proud of once it's finished.
I hope. I do intend to put a lot more positive energy and that kind of stuff, those intentions into future supplements and projects. Because I really do. I have a love for the horror and the mystery. I love the tension and the monsters and the strange static feeling across your body as you lean up against this door and wonder if you should open it or not. I love that stuff. I've been attracted to ghosts and horror and creepypastas and ARGs since I was a kid. And growing up, I was never able to appreciate horror unless it felt real. That's why I liked ARGs more than horror movies when I was burgeoning as an individual, because there was a level of disbelief to it that it was real, that these were real people experiencing this real phenomenon and it was legitimate. I am very much the I want to believe guy. But, I don't want to be too crazy now. Um, I love horror for all of this stuff and what it can do for people and what it's done for me. But also, I love cool, crazy anime fights and tactical games. So like, it's hard to mix all that together.
Yeah, yeah. But like introspection is also a significant part of a lot of anime stories as well.
In a way,
they'll be having a fight, and then there'll be like 2 minutes of dialogue between characters during like one sword swing as they're like having some mental conversation.
I'm gonna be honest. I talk about anime a lot. I have a lot of love in my heart for retro anime. I love a lot of stuff from the 90s and the 80s. I think it's the best. But oh my god, I hate anime tropes. I need to get some fucking hate out there for isekai, for Death Note, for like generic fantasies, for Goblin Slayer, and for ruining itself, and for Black Lagoon for never finishing. It's a horror.
I know why Death Note was included there, but I feel like it's a step above the other ones that you were alluding to for quality.
Well, the thing is, Black Lagoon is really good, but the author just never cared to finish it. And the anime never finished, and it's just it's a whole thing. It still pisses me off. And that's, Berserk as well, a pretty big old wound of mine with the fucking boat arc and Elfhelm or Elfheim or whatever it was called. And I think I quit reading around the time that Guts fought the whale, or like the ship in the whale's body. I don't know. It just felt so hacky. And I feel like a good part of my drive as an artist is to capture those key moments of a lot of the media I personally really enjoy without losing it to all of the things that causes really good things to start sucking. But that is every artist's hope, I feel.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, I think we've about reached the end. Is there anything else you want to talk about before we wrap up?
It's all reflective. Love yourself, and I don't know. It's over 9,000. I'm old, man.
Well, I usually finish off by asking for like a piece of DMing advice for others or DMing advice. So.
Actually, I've been on big autistic rants about this one before. Make your dungeons fluid. The key is a guide, not what's in the dungeon. Whatever happens, happens. And if a really important bridge burns down, then you already know that there's a secret dungeon in the chasm that you have to get through to get to the other side. Don't treat dungeons like they're an overworld adventure with just as much improv and adaptability and flow to them, with big bullet points of stuff that has to happen. And that's the only real difference. I hate linear dungeons where just the key is all that matters. I hate the 5 dungeon plot setup. It is such a limiting format. It is so lame. There are way better ways to do it, but that is a discussion for a whole different day. Just keep things fluid. A dungeon is like a story, but that story is what the players are doing, not what the key says.
Yeah, I've definitely modified dungeons that way before for my players.
Exactly, and that's one of the most important tools that you need to have if you're ever going to run a game of Psychomortis, especially that, because if the world reflects what happens in the players' minds and the characters' minds, and you're running a dungeon, unless your options for adapting that are limited unless you're designing the dungeon on the fly, and that's not recommended. So you need to keep the content fluid. And that's it. I won't repeat myself again.
All right, cool. Well, thanks, Calico. This is really cool. And yeah, like I said, very, very different experience than what I usually get for the interviews. I think it's a really cool game, and I hope it goes well.
Well, thank you. And I can't say ditto. Well, I think I can say ditto. That's how you use ditto, right? Yeah, ditto. To whatever it is that you're doing.
I did have one more question for you. Before we wrap up. Where can people find the game?
Okay, so right now there isn't a release copy on itch.io or drive-thru, but there is a development copy that you can find in the Discord. I can give you a Discord link to put in like some description or whatever if you want me to. But in the Discord, oh, you do already have it. You're in the Discord, yeah. In there is a game resources channel, and if you want to run the game, currently all of the GM tools are kept private because they're being updated and tweaked 24/7. Nothing is standard, so you can just ask me and I'll give you whatever it is that I have at the moment. Or ask Jeff in the Discord, the other DM. He also has access to those tools, but those tools are kind of outdated. I run private weekly games, and Jeff is planning to run a monthly game, and there will likely be room in the future for me to run a second game that would be bi-weekly, potentially, of course. And if we're plugging ourselves already, then follow me on Blue Sky and Blogspot. I post there sometimes. I haven't in a while, but being online is hard. And yeah, there's already a pretty, I would say, robust community of a good amount of people that are familiar with the game and can help you if you're ever confused or have questions. There's a lot of experienced players, and I am pretty much always available. I want to keep that bridge open for anybody curious or interested.
Yeah, cool. All right. Awesome. Thanks, Calico.
All right. You too. This was a fantastic opportunity, and this better get 1 billion views, or else I'm going to cry silently in my bed at night.
Of course.
I hope you enjoyed listening to that. If you want to learn more about Psychomortis and the work Calico is doing, there's a link to the Discord server for Psychomortis in the episode description. That's the best place to find out more about the game and the setting, and even join some playtests if you want. To help out the show, what you can do is you can take your listening device and put it at max volume in the most annoying place possible, and then more people will listen to the show. Don't actually do that. Instead, give us like a nice review on your podcasting app, and that helps the algorithm so more people will notice the show and listen in and join the crew, maybe on Discord as well. As always, thank you for listening, and thank you to Darren for being the Patreon for this show. Thanks.